All right, guys, we are here with Salena Rochester, who is the Director of Current Production and Development for both Bravo and E! Hi, Salena.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
So tell everyone exactly what your role is here at Bravo and give a little bit about what the day-to-day looks like for you.
So basically, I'm like a network executive, which means I oversee a bunch of shows for production for Bravo. And then for E, I develop shows. And then in terms of like my production role, I'm involved in everything from pre-production all the way to post-production. Pre-production is usually like casting, if it's a returning season, we always try to add at least one new cast member. So it's like finding that cast member. During production, it's a lot of calls with our production company. So at Bravo, we have what's called third-party production companies, and they're the ones who are like in the field shooting the show. And then we have weekly calls with them where we talk about, what's going on in the women's lives and, what's of interest, what's not of interest, and sort of shape what the season will look like. And then once post-production start, the same production company will send us like rough cuts of an episode. And then that's where we have to give a ton of notes, like, 5 pages worth of notes on the show. And then eventually it comes on air.
So I know you have been at Bravo for a long time. You've worked on a ton of shows since you've been here. Can you name a few for our listeners?
Mm-hmm. My very first show as a production exec was Fashion Queens, season 2, with Bevy and Derek J and Lawrence. And that was, I like to call it production boot camp because it was a live to tape show and was every week. So like we had to shoot it, edit it within 2 days, and then it would be on air. And it was insane. Like I would have to, because the show aired Friday night, so I would have to wake up like Saturday morning at 6 a.m. to watch the rough cut, to give notes. And then Sunday again, I think at like 9 a.m. to watch the final version, just to make sure it's okay. So it would air that night. So basically for the entire season, I had no social life, or if I had a social life, people knew that I had to be up in like 3 hours to watch a show. So it was insane. I did Blood, Sweat, and Heels as well. New York City Housewives, Atlanta Housewives. I've been on $1 Million Listing New York since season 4, I think, Luisa's first season. Inside the Actors Studio, which was always a fan favorite of mine. Yeah. And it was great. And James Lipton was an amazing, amazing host. Like all the wonderful things that people say about James is really true. Like he was just so smart and dedicated, and, he would send the longest like emails, but like they were just so well written and, just full of just beautiful language. And it's like, all you're doing is like pitching Beyonce to do Inside the Actors Studio, but it's like this beautiful like manuscript. But yeah.
Right. Well, everything related to Beyonce is beautiful, so it makes sense.
Exactly.
So how did you get into this field? Because I know that's something that a lot of people who want to get involved in production are really interested in. And I know I did a little stalking on your LinkedIn prior, and I know that you were kind of going in a different direction at first, and then you got involved in production. So can you talk through that?
So for undergrad, I was a political science major. I wanted to go to law school. I was like, that's what I want to do. But then I'm going to say like junior year, I was like, I don't really know if I want to do law. Like I'm not that passionate about it, but I am really passionate about film and TV. But at the time, like the idea of working in film and television just seemed so abstract. And it's like, I didn't want to be a starving artist. So I decided to get a master's in film and TV production, because honestly, what I did is looked up like all of the roles involved in film and TV, who are the people who make the money, and it was the producers.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, I'm going to be a producer. So I got my master's, and then right after I graduated from my master's program, I started the NBC Page program, which became famous on 30 Rock.
Right.
And I did it in 30 Rock, so I moved to New York. I was in NBC Page, basically gave tours all around 30 Rock. I know like the most random facts about the Today Show, the Tonight Show, and actually the Today Show also, and would give tours on those studios. And then an assistant position opened up at Bravo. So I applied and I got it, luckily. And so I was, working for the head of the department and another, like we used to call him the Housewives guru, because he oversaw most of the Housewives at that time. Yeah, from there, I just kept getting promoted, and, I pretty much stayed at the network. And then about a year ago, I decided to add development to, I guess, like what I was doing. Because, typically most networks will keep production and development completely separate. Like the development execs will develop a show, pass it over to production, and then we take it from there. But I wanted to do development also. And so now I do development and production.
Right, right. I mean, that's so cool to have such a well-rounded perspective then, if you're really seeing something from the idea stage all the way through filming and then post. I mean, that's incredible. You have such a wide array of experiences already.
Yeah, no, it's been interesting because they're two completely different sort of like ways to attack the same thing. Like, at the end of the day, it's going to be a TV show, but like the way in which you develop it is completely different from the way you produce it. And it's been great, like learning both of those so that, one day I can run my own network. I don't know.
Right. Hey, dream big. That's what we do, right? So working on Housewives, I would imagine some of the craziest experiences that you've had have probably been at reunions. So can you talk a little bit about maybe one of the most shocking moments from a reunion you attended?
Yeah, reunions are always a wild time. You never know what you're going to get. Like, because usually it's about 3 to 4 months after taping has wrapped. And of course, they've seen the entire season. So everyone comes in like riled up and ready to go, but also like wanting to just, fix whatever that might have happened within the season, like have clarity on it. I think for me, the wildest moment would probably be from Atlanta Housewives. And those were by far, I'd say, the most fun reunions because the ladies are so much fun and it's just like a great environment and like all the glam that's always around. It got pretty serious the year that Portia and Kenya got into that physical fight. And it was, it was difficult because for us, like, we're watching and the way it works is like, of course, the ladies are on stage and with Andy, and then the producers are in what we call video village, and so we're just watching everything, and you see like obviously Portia and Kenya having tense moments, getting into it, but no one ever really expects violence or fighting just because that's like contrary to what people think about reality TV. We really do have a mandate that, fighting and violence isn't tolerated because it's sort of like, it can bring down the tenor of what you're trying to do. So it was a split second. I mean, like 1 minute they were going at it and the next minute Portia, had Kenya by the hair and like dragged her across the stage. And I know people use the term, you got dragged, but it was literally a drag.
It was a literal drag, right?
Yeah. And it was really, it was difficult. We were all just very shocked. We didn't know what was going on. But I think for me, the hardest part, and I think also there was a redeeming moment for Portia. Like we showed it on the show where after that moment happened, Kenya got up and walked away and Portia was laying on the ground, just like hands over her face, crying and like just screaming, "I'm so embarrassed. I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I did that." And everybody was like, it was Phaedra, I remember, and Nene in particular, the executive producer, and of course cameraman, and all of us too, but we were sort of like on the outside because we can't be on camera, just like watching and like trying to get her like, it's okay, you can get up. But like she really, really was humiliated and really in that moment felt like she had done something wrong and just couldn't get off the floor. And it was like 20 minutes before anyone could actually get her off the floor. And it was just really hard. I felt bad for her because I knew that for her, she knew that this would be on TV and like people would judge her for having that one moment. So it was unfortunate. And then on the flip side, Kenya, of course, it felt terrible for Kenya because, this had happened to her. But what I really, really admired about Kenya is that after all of that, craziness, there would have been a lot of women who would have been like, "I'm done, I'm leaving," and would have left. But she, fixed her makeup, fixed her hair, came back on stage, was professional, and just like continued the conversation and was ready to go. And I was like, wow, that's a stand-up person. I mean, I think they were both equally, embarrassed, but they were equally professional in the end.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one thing you have to give Kenya is no matter what you think about her, she is a pro. And I think we've seen that over the years in a lot of ways, even just as Bravo employees. And I think viewers have seen that too. But that must have been a crazy moment to witness. And there must be also the producer side of you that is like, oh my God, this is going to make great television. Like as much as it was a very delicate moment and, the emotions were so high, you must have been like, wow, I can't believe this is going to be on air.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. I think, as a producer, like in our mind, the reason why we watch a reunion taping is about 12 to 14 hours, like a day. And we have maybe an hour break for lunch. And then you have, like breaks in between for hair and makeup and to use restrooms. So it's like a long day. But like when you see, like we're trained to sort of look for those big moments that will be talked about a lot or, could just really engage conversation. That's the point. We want our shows to engage conversation amongst viewers, whether it's good or bad. And that was definitely going to be a water cooler moment.
Right. No, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's still talked about today. It comes up on our show once in a while, when we're talking about Atlanta and the evolution of their relationships, especially Portia and Kenya, now that they're both both moms, and just to think how far that they've come since that moment is really remarkable. And I think that's why we love our shows, is to see that kind of growth in people over time. Now, on the flip side of reunions, when you are getting ready to launch a new show, like Married to Medicine Los Angeles, for example, or Southern Charm New Orleans, what is that process like? What are you looking for when you're getting ready to launch a new show?
So for Married to Medicine LA, it was really interesting because, it was a first season show, but it was a spinoff. And so it had the benefit of viewers already knowing what they're getting because they know what Married to Medicine Atlanta is. Married to Medicine LA will be the same, but with different women. But there's also a lot of pressure for us to ensure that we were the viewers would have the same benefits that they get from Atlanta for LA, but also not be too derivative of it because they had to have it. LA had to have its own flavor and style. So we try to definitely in the first season, not only showcase these women and, find really interesting, captivating women, but figure out what is the style of LA, how does an LA show shoot, and what does Black LA look like? At the time, Insecure was actually really big, and so creatively, we try to use that scripted show as a way to sort of make decisions about the music, about the graphics, about the way we would shoot the show. We have to take into consideration the aesthetic of a show, and because it was based in LA, we wanted it to have a very strong LA vibe. We wanted to ensure that the B-roll felt and looked like LA. They have a lot of murals around. This was right after Nipsey Hussle's death, and so we wanted to incorporate murals of Nipsey Hussle, or the long palm trees, or the sprawling mountains, and then the beaches, just so that when people are watching Married to Medicine LA, they're getting what they're used to, but they're also getting something new and different. So those are a lot of sort of the things that we look at when we're trying to launch a show. And then of course promotion, and you have to get a ton of press, and you want people to be interested, but that could be difficult because it's a new season and, people don't know these women yet.
Right. And so with something like Married to Medicine LA too, the kind of crossover moments that you guys have in often the premiere or the finale or something like that, where some of the cast members come in, I think that's always really interesting to see how, you're bringing in an audience from a different show into something that's a sort of break off of the same franchise. So what are those relationships like when you are trying to make those connections between the LA and Atlanta ladies? I mean, I know we have Dr. Contessa and Britton, they went to college together, so there's sort of that natural connection, but what is it like when you're blending casts on a show like that?
The only time we will do a crossover like that is if there are those authentic relationships. But when we were getting ready to shoot Married to Medicine LA, Contessa, I think, just mentioned to a producer to one of the Atlanta producers that she was going out to LA for Britain, and we were like, oh, well, that's a perfect, real, authentic way to sort of have the viewers be introduced to the LA ladies, because, they'd be introduced with people that they really love and like. And we found oftentimes that when a beloved talent or cast member endorses another show, it happened with Lisa Vanderpump and Vanderpump Rules, the reason why that crossover, that was a very natural crossover. Obviously, it's her restaurant, but having Lisa be the voice of oh, well, this is Stassi and this is Jackson. These are these people and this is why you should like them. It kind of helps the audience sort of understand who they are. And I think it helped a lot with Married to Medicine LA and Atlanta, and it was just a natural transition.
Yeah. How do you know someone is perfect for unscripted television? What is it that you look for before they get on the show? What is that?
Definitely for Bravo in particular, we love sort of loud, just really over the top people in a way that is fun and funny. So you definitely want people who have humor. Our shows, I think, are best when they're funny and they're, the women can have fun poking at themselves, poking at each other, but not in a mean-spirited way, which of course that does happen. So humor is the main thing. We need someone to be humorous. We also want someone who's not afraid to open up their lives or their life to cameras, because for 3 to 4 months out of the year, you're really supposed to share everything that's going on in your life with your producers so that we can have the most authentic story possible. I think a lot of times people think about reality and they think it's scripted or people are playing characters, but we look for real, authentic people. So everyone you see on our network, that's exactly who they are in real life. You just need someone who's unabashed.
Yeah, but almost unabashed in a subtle way, a very natural way.
Exactly.
That's so interesting. Now, have you ever had well, I'm sure you've had angry phone calls from talent, but like when you get those calls, what is it that they're most often upset about? Does it come out in, post-production or when shows are already airing and maybe the way that they've been shown on camera, or what is it that they usually are driven the most crazy over?
It's usually the post process, like when the show, well, really past post, when the show is airing and they see something that they don't like and they just want to vent, and it's weird because and we've seen it a ton on reunions. Editing, I was only shown that way because of the editing. So that's often like a big gripe. And then you sort of just have to talk them through the process. And it's like, no, of course not. Because we're really not in the business of making anybody look bad because then viewers would reject them and you won't have that. But it just comes with the territory. Like I'd rather the angry phone call or email than like I've been like at a person's home and they've gotten really upset in the moment, and it's like there's this one cast member, they were having a conversation with another cast member and I happened to be there because like oftentimes we'll attend some of these conversations, and I guess the line of questioning from the other cast member made the one woman get really sort of upset. And it's like, why are you asking these questions? So you have to like sit down in her living room as to why the other cast member was asking her those questions. It's like, this is a part of your life. She was upset and you just have to keep your calm and let them know that no one is trying to do any harm.
So basically being a producer is like part therapist.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of that, which is one of the reasons why, like when my career first started, I was like, I do not want to be in the field, is what we call it, like the production companies, because you have to be much more hands-on with talent. And it is, it's like therapy, like part therapist, part friend, but also like, you're a producer. And at the end of the day, it's like we're trying to get the best sort of, story possible.
With Married to Medicine LA, one thing that I found interesting is a big part of Jasmine's story this season is that her husband isn't around. So when you guys are filming and putting the show together, what are some of the challenges when, a spouse or someone important in their life doesn't want to be involved in the process?
It can be really, really challenging because, like I said, we want to tell the most authentic stories possible. And you can't tell a story about a woman who is married if you don't ever see your husband. And I think that was a big challenge with Jasmine. I don't it still baffles me to this point as to why he was never on camera or wanted to be on camera. That's a personal decision that they made. And of course, we can't force anyone to do it. And it happens often. I think it also happened with, Kenya and Mark. It's just oftentimes the spouse who didn't agree or have that desire to be on the show can sort of be trepidatious, and like a lot of times they really just need like one season to see and then they'll agree. It's hard because for instance with Jasmine, I remember, and this ended up becoming like a big thing throughout the season, and it wasn't intentional. It was because all of the women in the same way were wondering, well, where's her husband? Why isn't he around? And so when they went to her house for the Barbie party, then all of these wild conspiracy theories about him and is he a drug dealer?
Right.
Up, and it's like that's what happens. Like when you aren't fully honest with like your life, other people are going to tell that narrative for you, and so that's unfortunately what happened. But it can be very difficult. Husbands are on board, kids are on board. If they're oftentimes they're divorced couples and there might be a child from a previous marriage that the parent who isn't, involved in the show doesn't want their child on camera. And so, that's fine. Like what we usually do is like, we'll talk about it. Like, we'll have like the cast member, of course, because it's a part of their life, talk about it, but you just can't see that person. But it's just much harder when it's a husband and it's like,
right.
Like he has to show up at some point.
I really thought that we were going to maybe get a glimpse at him in the finale episode because Kendra was like trying to sneak up the stairs. Like that security guard was like, no. But I was like, oh my God, maybe he'll come down. Like maybe this will be the big moment at the end of season 2. But I guess we just have to stalk him on Jasmine's Instagram. That's the only option.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we were all the same. I remember I was there at that party and I was thinking the same thing. It's like, is he going to show up? Is he? I don't know. Because she said maybe, and we just follow the action.
Right.
But yeah, he's on her Insta, so he's a real person. That at least we know.
He's cute too. I mean, he's cute.
Yeah, very successful.
So being on Bravo for so long, if you could bring back a cast member to any show, who would it be and why?
That's a lot because there are a lot of people. The one cast member that I always, and I think luckily she's started making a few appearances in the past couple of years, but Jill Zarin from New York Housewives.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just because, she was a part of the original cast. And, then I was actually on the season. I started on the show the first season where we did the full, cast revamp and, Jill went away. But she was still, she's someone who, one, was still connected to all of the women. She was very much their friends. She would show up at parties, which is why you would see her sort of in the background. And usually, I don't know. She's just someone who I think could have come back and would have fit nicely, and maybe down the line, next season, you never know.
She made an appearance this season at Halloween, and she was sort of like, oh, let me just check in and see what's going on with you ladies.
Right. Yeah, with a new boyfriend, that's always
right.
Good. Whenever we do bring someone back, it's always so what has evolved in their life, and what will be new and different, but also the same, from before. And I think she has a lot of things going on would be interesting.
Right. Well, when someone does leave a show and come back, what is that process like, or that experience? Because we've seen that, with Kenya, with Sheree, with Nene even. So, what is it that you have to do to get them back to the show?
It really varies. In all those situations, they're all very different. And I think it starts with the reason why they left. And that is all very different too. And a lot of times it is really the women just wanting and needing to take a break. I think when Nene first left, I think even viewers could see that she was just her head wasn't in it at that time. She had the Ryan Murphy shows, and her clothing line was just taking off, and she had done Broadway, and it's she had so much her star really was rising, that it's you have to be fully dedicated. But she took a break, and then she decided to come back. And I think with most housewives who leave, there's always that door. It's sure, we're willing and open, and it's really all about figuring out what's going on in your life right now, who you're friends with in the cast. That's a big, big one, because you can't just come back and expect everyone to pick up, where you left off. You really have to be genuinely connected and friends with the people in the cast so that we can continue a show about women who are friends.
Right. Well, particularly with Atlanta, that's been huge with the various casting over the last couple of years. Were you on the show when Kandi met Todd?
Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
were? Okay,
Yeah.
So what was that like behind the scenes?
It was interesting. So I didn't know Todd prior to the relationship, but because he was a line producer on the show, and which meant he worked for the production company, and I usually just don't interface with the line producers. But it was really interesting because the year that they met was the season that they went to South Africa, and the cast went to South Africa, and there was this moment where they all went to see a fortune teller who was reading tea leaves, I believe. In that moment, he looks up at Kandi and he's like, "Your husband is here with you." And she's like, "What?" And he's like, "He's here." Little did anyone know, he was back, right, probably standing around with a clipboard,
right.
doing his job. And, the one thing I will say, obviously, that's just tricky territory when talent and a producer engage in a relationship. But Kandi has always been a stellar businesswoman, and on the up and up, and very professional. And immediately, she let people know of the relationship. And it's we can't stop people from falling in love. And the fact that it got to the point where it's now they're ready to actually get married. We wanted to obviously do the wedding special, which I was a part of producing as well. But there was a point where Todd sort of had to be talked into being on camera, because when you're a producer, your job and your role is to be as far away from cameras as possible. And
right.
Oftentimes producers don't want to be on camera. I have zero desire to ever be on camera. It just makes me uncomfortable. That was a process, because you are now about to marry an Atlanta housewife and one of the most famous housewives. You're going to have to be on camera. So it was interesting for him, I think in that first year or so. And I remember being at the wedding when we all producers were in our video village, and there were some of the producers who had worked with him for years, and they were crying and crying. And it's so weird to see the producers so emotional at a wedding, but it's because they're producing this wedding, but they're also producing one of their best friends'
right.
wedding. So it was really nice. And I think that was like one of the best sort of like scenarios in which a talent and a producer can get together.
Yeah, and we haven't heard the end of it, from Mama Joyce through like many seasons at this point. So that's really funny. Yeah, I remember hearing about the tea leaves thing not too long ago and being like, oh my God, that's right. He was like in the room or there at least on the trip. That's so crazy. This season of Real Housewives of New York City has brought new housewife Leah McSweeney. So she has made quite a splash this season. What are your thoughts on Leah?
I love Leah. Absolutely love Leah. She's like perfect, would you say like perfect casting because she fits right in with all of the women. Like, that's often the hardest part is like, will like the chemistry be there? Will oftentimes with new cast members, they're kind of like overwhelmed by it all because like these are big, larger than life personalities. People have been on TV for years. And like, there's like usually an intimidation factor, but Leah like was not intimidated, did not care. Like she's completely and authentically herself. And that's like the number one thing you want with someone on camera who's willing to show you the good, the bad, the ugly. And what really sold me for her was like her first night of getting like super wasted and just like going crazy. And it's like, okay, well, that's amazing because it makes good TV. But the next day, she was just like, oh, yeah, whatever. That's just me. And I'm
this is me. Yeah.
Like, that's what you need. Because usually there's people like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that on camera. Oh my God, the world is going to see me act like a fool.
Right.
But, like, she embraced it. So,
like Lisa Rinna says, own it.
Exactly. And those are always like the best like cast members, like people who can own who they are. They're going to go far.
Now, what did you think about Tinsley leaving mid-season?
It wasn't a surprise for me at all.
Right.
Like I worked on when Tinsley was casted, her first season up until my last season on it, which was 2 seasons ago. And when she met Scott, that was kind of, I think everyone knew that if she got that ring, she's deuces from the New York City Housewives and made it. Yeah, she got a ring and I'm really happy for her. Like, I really hope like they can unfreeze the egg and like she can have her babies and she can live that housewife fantasy that she's always wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I miss her. I do miss Tinsley because I really did love her. But it was, these ladies are going to carry the season just fine, I think, without her because they are pros.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
A lot of Bravo shows, particularly this year, are starting to break the fourth wall. So from a production perspective, what is that like for you guys?
I, for one, am glad that that's happening. I think for me, like, I'm on the younger side, like being a younger executive. So it's like, I remember the before where, we just couldn't talk about it at all. But I think shows like the Kardashians were like, that was sort of the first show that gave other networks confidence that you can break the fourth wall because the Kardashians had gotten so big that it's like, there are just certain things in their life that you can't really address without addressing the fact that they're on a reality show. And I think that show did it really well where you didn't take viewers too far out of the TV show in a way, because that's sort of like the line that we're always ensuring that we don't cross, like when you're breaking the fourth wall, because people come to the show for escapism. They want to just chill, relax, not think about it. I'm watching TV. But if you just sort of like break that and it's like, well, this is actually a reality, like start showing cameras and like the nuts and bolts of it all, that can take them out of it.
Right.
But at the same time, a lot of our shows also have gotten so big that there's just drama that like is obvious because like you're on a show and like, things in the blogs. Like I think it started with the blogs. Like Atlanta particular, Married to Medicine also with Dr. Jackie and her husband cheating, like all like stuff like that happened on the blogs, like the headlines on the blogs, which we will often put up in our show because it just like it's a way to tell the story. We'll say, Married to Medicine star husband caught cheating, so it's like you kind of have to break it in that way. And then there are also the moments that I love or that I don't shy away from is when the cast members are talking to producers, because like you said earlier, producers in a way are like a therapist. And so when there's a really intense moment, that they're going through, a lot of times they will just break off and just have to go talk to their producer and just like have that in the moment sort of like emotional sort of like dump.
Word vomit.
Yeah, exactly. And like in the past, we wouldn't show any of that. Sometimes we would like subtitle it, but now we've embraced like that conversation because it's real and it's like it has to happen. And they oftentimes you get the best moments. My favorite breaking the fourth wall moment was from Married to Medicine, the reunion where Simone and Cecil were going through a divorce. And so all of like no one knew what was happening. We came in the day of the reunion and Simone, you know, pretty much told producers, yeah, like we're getting a divorce and I want to tell the women on the reunion set. And we're like, oh, okay, sure. Like, you know, it's going to be a great, very real, authentic, visceral moment for the rest of the ladies. And it was. But what we didn't expect was when, after she had broke it to the ladies that they were getting a divorce, you know, cameras went down so that we can do our, I think it was lunch break. And so all the women are, you know, piling backstage into their dressing rooms. But like everyone was just so shocked and like they were just, no, Simone, you can't do this. Like all the moments that, you know, you guys see, like I remember someone must have been like, there are real conversations happening right now. Get a cameraman. And like a cameraman gets up, gets his camera, like dashes down. We didn't even have like the audio. I think we were just using like the boom mics at that time, but it was just real, authentic moments. And so like, you know, it's backstage, like it's messy and dirty. And usually like as producers, we like everything to look nice and pretty, but like we had to show it and we had to like have those real authentic conversations and then like come back on set. And then Andy had to address it while we were on lunch break. You know, women had these conversations and then it led to Simone and Cecil saying, okay, we'll work on our marriage. And then 3 years later, they're still married and like so happy. And so like that was definitely like one of my best moments. Like, oh, a TV show saved a marriage. Like,
yeah, no, for real. I mean, I think it's so cool too, because I think it's particularly interesting for the super fans of our shows. And I remember, you know, before I worked on Bravo, I worked on Oxygen before the rebrand, and the big show was Bad Girls Club. And fans loved when the producers got involved because it kind of brought everyone down to reality, you know, being like, oh my God, this is a show. And like when they stepped in, you knew it was serious, or you knew that there was something that was happening that was going to be really important. And, you know, I just think those moments are so cool. And it's happening, you know, Beverly Hills this season. It's going to be happening on RHONY next week. We saw a preview of Ramona being like, get me a producer. And I was just like, oh my God, I can't wait for that.
Right, exactly. Because that's usually when they're the most like unfiltered because they're just angry or emotional and they're really not thinking about the cameras, and it's important because you want those moments.
Now, final question. We know obviously the pandemic has changed so many things about our world, but what has it been like in terms of production trying to get these shows completed when you have this massive pandemic going on?
It's been really interesting, and I will say it's been like an exciting time for me, and I think the production world, like a very scary time because, you know, we don't know what's going to happen like long term and like how it's going to affect the shows that come on air. And obviously I think viewers are seeing now like there's such a big gap between episodes because like everything shut down when the country went into quarantine. But what I loved is how we all sort of like really just moved quickly and had to figure it out because it's like, yes, like quarantine, pandemic, but the show literally must go on.
Right.
And we just had to figure it out, like with Married to Medicine LA. So we had finished production, but we were in the process of still getting like, you know, those interviews, like the kind of, I feel like I'm in an interview. Yeah, confessionals, right? Yeah, we call them the interviews, the confessionals. So, you know, some of those confessionals are shot after the season. And that's because, you know, you have to ask questions about the finale event or what have you. And we had to figure out, like, how do we shoot with everyone quarantined? Like, you can't, like, producers can't come to your house. The women can't leave. You can't have glam. It was just crazy. And so each show sort of came up with their own, like, way of attacking it. With Married to Medicine LA, I thought we came up with a really interesting plan. So we put together a production kit. And when I say we, I should say the production company, like they did a great job doing all of that. But they would put together a production kit, which was like an iPhone. I think they were using like a lighting kit and a sound kit. Actually, messenger it to the women's house, drop it off on their doorstep and leave. The women would then have to open up their door, bring all the production equipment inside, and then get on the phone with production and talk through how to set up lighting gear. Now I'm talking about housewives like Lisa Rinna, like
right.
You know, the Married to Medicine ladies. So it's like we were all just like, how's this gonna go? But like in the end, it was really good. And like, you know, they were able to set up the lighting, set up the sound, sort of set up I think we had like cameras, iPhones on tripods, and then like typically there's an actual producer in the room asking questions. And so this was a little difficult because there was no producer in the room. And with Married to Medicine LA, I think we had a producer like FaceTiming them. And so they could at least see and have that interaction. Because some of the times, we were asking questions that could be quite emotional because it's questions like having to do with the things that we see on air. And it was interesting. Like, there were first a couple of the takes we had to redo just because like lighting was off. Like there are things you don't take into consideration. Jasmine, for instance, has like curly blonde hair. So like the lighting against her backdrop like created this halo effect, and we were like, no, we can't have the halo effect. And so we had to rearrange lighting. And then like there were certain women who like their eye line wasn't straight, like they'd be looking up like this, or they'd be like, and it's like, no, that's going to be distracting for viewers. Like there was a margin of error. Like luckily everyone in the industry was going through this, so we knew that like if we weren't perfect, like it'd be okay, but we wanted to be as close to perfect as possible. Like most producers are like type A personalities, like, especially creatives, like, no, it has to look beautiful. So there were a lot of retakes. Like Imani has a bald head. And so like the lighting had a lot of highlight on her head. So like the top of her head was really shiny. And we're like, oh, we can't do that. So we have to figure that out. The glam of it all was a challenge at one point. I think usually like on Married to Medicine LA, we have the doctors wear their white lab coats in the confessionals, just, to distinguish the doctors from the wives. It's just an aesthetic choice. But like we had gotten in a confessional, and the entire time Britton didn't have her white lab coat on. And that's probably because there's no producer there to remind her. And it was really like her outfit was great. Like I love Brit. She's so she has such great style. And that was really interesting too, to see like the different iterations of like self-glam. A lot of the women did really well. I think they were able to get it together on their own. But it was interesting. And moving forward, we're still very much in the midst of COVID. Luckily, there are states that are starting to allow production again. And so whatever state will allow production, hopefully we can get started shooting some of our shows. But it's an interesting time. And I think the gaps that people are seeing in terms of like new episodes airing might continue happening. But what I've loved is how viewers are just fine with it. Like they're going with the flow of it all. Like, because it's like we're all in it, like the fact that I cannot get up every day and go to the office and I'm working from home is just indicative of like the world that we all live in. Like no one is doing things the same anymore.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And it's funny that you were talking about Imani and her bald head, because one thing that I always pay attention to on the show is when she's doing her makeup, like how high up she goes. Because like I've never thought of that. Like I'm just like, oh yeah, that's true. I guess she would have to maybe do her makeup a little higher than other people.
Yeah, you're right. You're totally right.
I'm telling you, when you watch it back now and you see her doing her makeup, you're going to notice that she goes a lot higher.
Yeah, it's so funny. I do want to go back like and watch that. I know I will say about Imani and the bald head, like one like shot that we really wanted to get season 2 was like her shaving her head, just because like, she's just such a beautiful and just such a striking woman. And like there are very few like women who can pull, men too, honestly.
People, yeah, generally people.
A bald head. So like, I just remember we were like, let's see what that routine is like, and she was all game. She was like, sure. Like I remember she was like, you guys, okay, fine. And but like you're watching to see where her makeup, and like that's true. Like that viewers really do, like fans are just like excited to see all of that type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Salena, this was so awesome. Thank you so much. I feel like we've learned a lot, and you've given us so many interesting behind the scenes tidbits. Like, this is so awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course. I'm happy to talk and do this.